Good morning, class. Happy Friday, fun Friday, Friday the 18th. Today for reading, we have our first reading test. Now, your reading test this year will look a lot like the reading test you took last year with Miss Mackey if you were here at Garden Homes. There will be the first story, about a page and a half, and then 10 questions that goes with that story. Then you'll have a second story, about a page and a half, and 10 questions that go with that. My plan is to read you the story and read you the questions. When you do the questions, you're going to put them on the answer key that looks like this. Okay? Remember to always start with your name at the top so you can get credit for it. All shook up. Now, this one you feel free to mark up if you find any things in here that you think that you would help you with the test. On August 23rd, 2011, an earthquake shook the eastern part of the United States. No major damage or injury were reported. The center of the earthquake was in Virginia. This quake had a magnitude of 5.8. Magnitude is a way to measure how strongly the ground shakes during an earthquake. Now, I underline that because this sentence talked about magnitude, and then the next sentence started with magnitude is, which means here comes the definition. So this is the definition of the word magnitude. I don't know if it's going to be on the test or not, but it's just a guess. The strongest quake ever documented had a magnitude of 9.5. People near the center of the Virginia quake reported it sounded like a train roaring to a stop. The ground heaved and buildings swayed. Further away, people felt only a slight shaking of the ground. Recovery begins. Notice these headings on them was one of the things that we studied this week with expository writing. They have lots of headings so we can find our answers easier. After the earthquake, there was a lot of work to be done. Everything needed to be checked for damage. Schools and government buildings, roads, and most bridges were closed. Train tracks and airports also needed to be inspected. Even a nuclear power plant was shut down until it was checked. How quakes work. Earthquakes are caused by the shifting of huge rocks deep underground. These rocks are called plates. Sometimes these plates crack or break apart. The area where they separate is called a fault. Not my fault, but a fault line. Remember, that was one of those words that had two different definitions. When the plates move, they grind together. This causes the ground above it to shake. Sometimes the edges suddenly slip past each other and cause the earth to move. There are faults all over the United States. However, some areas are more active than others. A long fault runs through most of California. This fault is very active, so earthquakes happen there more than other parts of our country. Now, I like to flip it over and then turn to the back side. If you're looking for a page number, it's 26 is the second part of the story. There are also faults near an area affected by Virginia's quake. This quake was unusual because it happened in the middle of a plate instead of along a fault. That's why the Virginia one was strange. The energy created by the Virginia quake traveled further than most quakes in the West. This is because much of the rock under the east is solid and cold. When these rocks shift, the energy travels long distance. In the West, the rock is cracked and warm. These cracks prevent energy from traveling far. So now we have a little compare and contrast there. We had the east is solid and cold. The West is cracked and warm. We studied compare and contrast this week, so I'm guessing that that's going to be a question on the test. Earthquakes are dangerous. It is important to know what to do in an earthquake, no matter where you live. If you ever find yourself in the middle of an earthquake, find shelter under a table, desk, or other sturdy object. Stay away from windows or anything that might fall. Cover your head until the shaking stops. Don't go outside until it's over. And don't use the elevators. All right, so there's our first story. Here comes our first 10 questions. Page 27 is where we are. Number 1. Now here's some test-taking tips. First of all, a lot of times in the reading story, they're going to have two answers that are completely wrong. We want to throw those out. Then they're going to have one question that is the correct answer. That's the one we're looking for. And then one question that's close. I like to call it the trick. So let's see if we can identify some of the ones that are completely wrong to up our odds of selecting the correct one. How does the author organize paragraph 2 on page 26? Now, you can't just guess. You got to go read paragraph 2 on page 26. So it's the second page, Page 26, paragraph 1, paragraph 2. Oh my goodness, I already know the answer because we had guessed that. They're comparing and contrasting the east and the west. Well, let's see if that's one of our choices. By explaining how rocks in the west is different, by telling the problem that earthquakes cause, by describing the effects of the Virginia earthquake, by comparing how energy from earthquakes travel in the east and the west. Obviously, the answer is D. Now, I'm not going to give you all the answers, but I want you to get started off on the right foot. That's an idiom, by the way. 2. Read the following sentence from the article. On August 23rd, 2011, an earthquake shook the eastern part of the United States. No major damage or injuries were reported. Which meaning of major is the same one used above? Important, officer, program, serious. Now, officer is obvious the trick because an officer in the Army is called Major. That's his name. Major is an Army name. So which of the other three would be the same as Major? Once you select it here, make sure you put it on your answer key. All right, number 3. Why does the author tell about the type of rock under the east and the west? To contrast the distance energy travels through the different rocks, to compare earthquakes in the south and north, to show the problem waves of energy create, to explain the cause of the West Coast quake. Virginia's in the east. So those two are obviously out, and I'm pretty sure C doesn't make any sense. I'm going to go with A for number 3. Because it was talking about that energy travels through the cold, solid rock farther than the warm, cracked rock. The author shows how earthquakes happen by describing the damage, by explaining the effects of earthquakes, by comparing what happens underground, by telling how to stay safe. The author shows how earthquakes happen. Well, staying safe isn't going to tell you how it happens. Okay? Explaining the effects, that's what happens after it. How earthquakes happen. By describing the damage, that sounds like after too, or by comparing what happens underground. Where do earthquakes take place? I think that one's pretty self-explanatory too. I'm going to select H on that one. All right, number 5. Turning over to the back side here, page 28. Read the following sentence from the article. Magnitude is a way of measuring how strong the ground shakes during an earthquake. The strongest quake ever documented had a magnitude of 9.5. Which meaning of documented is the same as the one used in the sentence above? Documented. Earthquake ever documented. Ever felt, ever lifted, ever recorded, or ever seen. Which word means documented? Go ahead and select your answer and put it in your answer key. Number 6. Read the following sentence from the article. The ground heaved and buildings swayed. Further away, people felt only a slight shake of the ground. Which meaning of heaved is the same as the one used in the sentence above? The ground heaved and buildings swayed. Crashed, lifted, rested, through. Obviously, you can't throw the ground, so that one's out. So between those other 3, select the correct answer. Now we got to go back to our story and look in paragraph 6 on page 25. Why does the author mention California? All right, so go back to the beginning. It's the first page, and let's number the paragraphs. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The last paragraph on that page. There are faults all over the United States. However, some areas are more active than others. A long fault runs through most of California. This fault is active. So I think they're talking about the fault in California being very active and lots of volcanoes happening there. All right, well, let's find it. I'm on to question number 7. Why does the author mention California? To contrast the effects of the Virginia quake? To contrast the faults of the East and the West? Ooh, that might be it. To compare how people react different? No, nothing about people. To compare all different types of earthquakes. All right. See, sometimes when I eliminate it, it makes the right answer easier to find. Number 8. Read the sentence from the article. Everything needed to be checked for damage. Schools, government buildings, roads, and most bridges were closed. Which word means the same as damage in the sentence above? Checked for damage. Cost, injuries, marks, problems. You got this, guys. That maybe was one of the easier ones on the test. Number 9. In paragraph 2, now whenever it says this, we have to go back. In paragraph 2, page 25, the author shows that the Virginia quake was different from other quakes by contrasting its effects, magnitude, safety, temperature. Paragraph 2, page 25. The center of the earthquake was in Virginia. This quake had a magnitude of 5.8. Magnitude is a way of measuring how strong the ground shakes during an earthquake. The strongest earthquake was 9.5. So I think it's talking all about magnitude. So let's find out. Effects, magnitude, safety, temperature. Pretty easy. Number 10. Read the following sentence from the article. Sometimes these plates crack or break apart. They are where the area where they separate is called a fault. Which meaning of fault is the same as one used above? It's your fault, blame. That's the trick. You do not pick blame. That's not the fault we're talking about here. Responsibility, split, defect. All right, guys, pause and go back to any of them that you missed. I'm going to keep going. We're going to read section 2 and then take the second portion of our test. We're half done. If you need to, pause and take a drink of your coffee. Drink of water. The importance of precipitation. Now, precipitation is rain or snow or sleet or anything that falls from the sky that's liquid water. Have you ever seen a water wheel? These large wheels look like a tire made completely out of wood. The edges of the wheel is covered with buckets or slots. Now, the water wheel they're talking about is like if you ever gone to a water park and it dumps, these buckets go round and round and round, and they dump water into this huge old bucket, and then finally it's so full that that bucket tips over and pours on all the kids screaming in joy below it. Some of these wheels turn when they are pushed by the force of running river. Other water wheels spin when water is poured over the top and fills the bucket. The weight of the water forces the wheel to spin around. A process similar to this happens on Earth every day. It is known as the water cycle. Heat from the sun warms water in lakes and rivers and oceans. The water turns into a vapor. This gas rises into the air. The process is called evaporation. The water droplets join together in clouds. Eventually, they get so heavy that the air cannot hold them any longer. When they fall from the clouds, they become precipitation, and the process repeats itself. Liquid precipitation is called rain. When the air is very cold, the water freezes in the clouds. We call this solid form of precipitation snow, sleet, or ice. The good and the bad of precipitation. The water cycle is very important. However, too much precipitation can have bad effects. When too much rain falls, it can cause problems. When water covers an area that is usually dry, a natural disaster called floods occur. Sometimes floodings happen in cities. When this happens, property can be destroyed and roads are closed. Once the water drains away, the problem in the cities can be fixed. The same is not true outside the cities. Property damage kind of sounds like we're comparing cities and outside of cities here. Property is damaged and roads are closed here too, but floods also damage crops. This problem cannot be fixed quickly because soil is also usually ruined after a flood. This means new crops cannot be planted right away. During winter, heavy snow, strong winds, and heavy precipitation often combine to cause blizzards. For these storms, roads close, schools shut down, and airports cancel flights. Entire cities come to a complete stop. Precipitation affects what people wear, too. People use umbrellas to keep dry in the rain. They wear special clothing such as heavy coats, hats, and mittens to keep warm in the snow. Boots help people to keep their feet dry and warm in both the rain and the snow. Okay, so helpful tips. Did you know precipitation does many good things too? In the hot summer, precipitation helps to lower temperatures. It also cleans harmful things out of the air. Good and bad, we need precipitation. Whether it is liquid or a solid or a gas, precipitation is an important part of our lives. So here was the good, and most of the rest of the story was the bad. So we have a few compare and contrasts in there as well. All right, you guys are doing great. 5 more minutes and we'll be finished up here. Number 11. The author organized the article by explaining the sequence of events in the water cycle, how the water cycle cleans the air. Now that was true, but that was just the last paragraph. That one's out for me. Life inside and outside the city, or how precipitation affects us. And I think the whole story was about how precipitation affects us. This was just in the first part. This was the whole story. Number 12. Read the following sentence from the article. Heat from the sun warms water in lakes, rivers, and oceans. This water turns into vapor. This gas rises into the air. Which meaning of vapor is the same one used in the sentence? Is that a gas, a mist, a rain, or a snow? This water turns into a vapor. This gas. Oh my goodness, it's like they gave you the answer right there. Number 13. The author contrasts, that means tells how they're different, rain and snow in the article to show what causes rain, the effects of snow, how they are different, or how the snow is worse than rain. Now, I don't know that it was showing snow was worse than rain, and they both are bad if there's too much, but they're good if there's not. So I'm going to cross out D, and then I'm going to think about the word contrast, which means to tell how something is different, and that's going to lead me to my answer. Number 14. The author describes flooding inside and outside of the city to show how flooding is different in those places, is worse inside the city, can be stopped, can't stop rain, is caused. Okay, I think that makes it pretty easy why he would do that. Tell us about him. (15) Read the following sentence from the article. A process similar to this happens on Earth every day. It is known as the water cycle. Which sentences use cycle in the same way it is used above? So I'm already thinking bicycle. It has nothing to do with a bicycle. Okay, so let's think outside of that. She had to cycle back to the house to get it. A baby being born is part of the life cycle. Would you like to cycle over to the park? What kind of cycle do you ride? Talking about a bike, talking about a bike, talking about a bike. That's not what we're talking about. All right. So we got the life cycle. It's kind of like the water cycle. And you'll see this in science this year. 16. Read the following sentence from the article. This water turns into vapor. This gas rises into the air. This process is called evaporation. Which word helps you understand what evaporation means? Call, process, vapor, water. Select your best answer for that one. Number 17. The author helps the reader understand the effects of precipitation by explaining the effects of precipitation, the effects of rain and snow. Solutions to flooding, problems with snow, how clouds are formed, ways people deal with precipitation. Effects, effects, effects. Okay, select your answer. We'll go on to number 18. Read the following sentence from the article. This water turns into vapor. The gas rises into the air. Which sentence uses gas in the same way as used in the sentence above? Now, there's a kind of a gas, like if you pass gas. That's not what we're talking about here. So think about the gas as it's used in this one with vapor. Ha ha, I know, that was funny. Which sentences use gas the same way? I'm running out of gas in my car. We need to stop for gas in my car. The balloons are filled with gas. My brother worked at a gas station. And number 19. Read the following sentence from the article. The water cycle is very important. However, too much precipitation can have bad effects. When too much rain falls, it can cause problems. Which words mean the same as effects? Obviously, cause is not it. That's the opposite. Ideas, lessons, results. And number 20. The author begins the article with a description of a water wheel to describe precipitation. No, that didn't help us with precipitation. Compare it to the water cycle. Show how it causes flooding. The water wheel doesn't cause flooding. Explain how to use it to make snow. A water wheel does not make snow. Oh my goodness, the last one maybe was too easy. Guys, that's it. You did it. You did your first reading test. Now, if you have to, reread. What do I mean to read? Well, I'll play my video again if you have to. Otherwise, you can reread it on your own to check to make sure any of the ones that you didn't get right. For example, I didn't quite get number 17, let's say. So I'm going to go back to number 17 and say, what in the world was going on with number 17? Or number 5 or number 6 or whatever you were at. Number 17, the author helps the reader understand the effects of precipitation by explaining the solution to flooding, problems with snow, ways people deal with precipitation. And so I think that both of these are kind of the same, and you can't pick both, so I'm going to get rid of both those, and this one talks about both of those, because precipitation is both snow and rain from flooding. So I didn't know it. I marked it on my answer key. I went back. I eliminated some of the ones I didn't think was right, and then I went on. Okay, you can do that with number 6 or 5 or any of the ones you missed. So check it over and use all of your strategies. Then when you're done, make sure your name's at the top of the paper. Make sure these are filled in completely, not little X's, not circling them, not scribbles outside the box, just filled in nice and neat and completely, of course, with your pencil. All right, God bless your day.